Right, we'll make a start, and if Mike shows up halfway, we'll just chuck it in and back on. So thank you everyone for coming. It's honestly dead exciting to see so many people in the library. We run author events basically every month at this point. Next month we have R.A. Sandpiper coming on December the 6th. She's an indie romantasy author. And in January we've got Nikki Beswick coming, who writes dark fantasy. And then next year we've got Tim Logan, Lee Child, Tim Weaver. We've got a big bunch of crime people coming at the same time. Yeah, if you follow us on Facebook, I will spam you. I probably already have done through Eventbrite. This event is in partnership with the British Fantasy Society. We have some goodies in the corner over here. If anybody wants, they're brilliant for fantasy writers and readers, and they also cover horror, which I learned recently. I've been into horror as well. And yeah, thank you so much to Gareth and Anna for coming along. Oh, hang on.
Here he is.
Oh.
It turns out the M1 ain't friendly. I need to go and find a small room that way.
Oh yeah, on that floor, just on the back wall there. Right. I'll leave it. Just by way of introductions for yourselves, Gareth L. Powell is an award-winning science fiction writer, creator of the Embers of War series, Akak Makak, which is insane and brilliant. And you won the British Science Fiction Association Awards for Best Novel for those two.
Yes.
It's incredible. And Gareth has also written, if anybody's a writer, a brilliant book called About Writing, which is awesome and really broad and covers everything from writing craft to the industry of publishing as well. And it's awesome. And Anna Stevens is the creator of the Godblind trilogy and the Songs of the Drowned trilogy, which starts with a stone knife. And she's also written for Warhammer and their Warhammer Horror imprint, and for Marvel as well.
Yep.
And Anna is a writing mentor as well through the Write Advice.
That's correct.
Which is a brilliant company who offer all sorts of advice for aspiring writers. And Stephen Arian, who's visited us before, is also a member of the Write Advice.
Yep.
Yeah, if you need any sort of feedback on your first novels or mentoring or anything like that, speak out.
There are some bookmarks over on the table back there that have the web address on, and also a list of the services that we offer.
Brilliant. We do have books for sale as well. We have the Heath Bookshop at the back. We've brought some books along for sale at the end, and I'm sure you guys will find signing.
Nope.
Brilliant. So, just to make a quick start, and by way of a hello, if I could ask you, what are your favourite fictional worlds, other than the ones you've created and the ones by people you've worked for, just to get you out of it in case Marvel isn't?
I am bound by NDA not to reveal anything like that. I would say my easiest one to talk about would be the Discworld, Terry Pratchett. Yeah. It's because of the entire ridiculous premise of it. You can have anything and everything in that world, and he pretty much did have anything and everything. And I love the variety, and I love the, I mean, I could talk about Terry Pratchett forever, so you should just stop me when it gets too boring. But I just love the fact that he tried so many different things, and he had so many different characters, but he talked about so many different social justice themes and class and religion and oppression and all of that good stuff. And there was just so much of it. And gone too soon. But Terry Pratchett and the Discworld is probably one of my favourites.
Yeah. How about yourself?
I think the one I'd most like to live in is probably Culture by Ian M. Banks.
Oh, right, yeah.
Because, very bad things happen in that novel. It was in that series of novels. The vast majority of the culture's citizens is one big party.
Right.
It's post-scarcity civilization. You get to live in a big spaceship zooming around the universe forever. What could be better?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Yeah.
Did you have a good
I'll add an extra hour for the journey, and the M1 said nope.
Oh, yeah.
It's like estimated arrival time 11:14, 11:35, 11:47, 12:10. It's like, oh, it's going to be one of those.
Oh, man.
Sorry, everybody.
Oh, you okay?
I did my best, but
I feel like I should move
they're
up
slightly
one.
incompetent.
It's not you, but I'm going to move up one because there's a big gap.
Okay.
I'm not trying to get away from you.
Okay. Well, it won't work. I'll just follow you.
I know that is true. But have a microphone.
What? Oh, okay. Don't you need it?
Oh,
We've got one there.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Slide up.
We can get you in the camera now, you see.
It's graceful.
Yeah, just by way of introduction to Mike, Mike Brooks is the author of the Godskin Chronicles and the Keiko series of space operas, and he's basically a rock star in the Warhammer 40,000 universe from all of the novels you've written in that universe. Like the Orc novels are brilliant, Brutal Cunning. I read Huron Blackheart recently, which was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, and you're in an actual rock band as well.
A punk band, but yes.
Brilliant.
And when you say actual, that's I mean, we play. I was going to say we play music. I might be stretching it. We play punk.
What's the name?
Interplanetary Trash Talk.
We were just asking, what's your favourite fictional world movie or book? And you're not allowed to mention any that you work for.
Well, yeah, no, I mean that's probably fair. I'm sure I heard while I was getting my hearing aids in. I'm sure I heard one of you mention Discworld. Yes, I probably have to spur of the moment. I probably have to go for Discworld again, simply because of the versatility of it. Because obviously it started initially as a parody of fantasy, but then it sort of turned into a world where Terry Pratchett could tell any sort of story he wanted and just use it as a background, which I think ties into one of my opinions, which is that sci-fi and fantasy is not a genre, it's a setting. Right. Because you don't, apart from, I guess, some sort of hard sci-fi stuff, you don't have science fiction or fantasy novels that are a science fiction novel or a fantasy novel. It's usually some other sort of novel. It might be an adventure, or it might be a murder mystery, or a war novel, or a romance. But it's the science fiction or fantasy part of it just means that the physics works differently here, or we found ways to manipulate physics that we don't currently have, and so that's why I say it's more of a setting, and that's why I think the Discworld is so great, because it just became a setting. Or there's certain established rules that you know. But he was able to then use that background as a place to tell any story he wanted.
Yeah, because there's no such thing as a science fiction plot. Like,
yeah, I mean, I was saying, in like some of the hard sci-fi stuff, and maybe you got middle of the last century, you might have things where authors went, I have an idea for a science concept, and that is the point of the story. Yeah. I personally don't find those sort of stories particularly engaging. Because the characters tended to take a back seat as opposed to I'm going to experiment with science. I guess Adrian Tchaikovsky does that quite well. He sort of he can tend to put science right at the forefront of a story, but there's still a story like Shroud is a story that's very much about science, but it's a survival. So the science is very front and center, and that's sort of what the book is about, but the way the characters experience that story is a survival. Yeah. So
what drew you to writing in science fiction and fantasy in the first place? Did you start off in science fiction and fantasy when you were deciding to be a writer?
I've just talked a lot. I'm going to let someone else go first.
I started off writing science fiction stories at the age of 6.
That's amazing.
And then the education system did everything it could to beat that out. I studied creative writing at university for 3 years, part of my degree, under a poet who point blank refused to read anything that was science fiction. So I wrote intense amounts of science fiction just to really annoy him. And then when I was in the sixth form at school, maybe slightly earlier, my English teacher entered me into a competition, and the prize was to have your work reviewed by Diane Wynne-Jones.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Wow.
That's amazing.
So I went along like a nervous 15 or 16-year-old to this cafe in town and sat down, and this witchy woman with the huge hair came and just brutally ripped the story I've written to absolute shreds.
Really?
But it was I've still got her handwritten notes that she wrote for it, because it was such a scales falling from the eyes moment. Because at school you're taught to use long words and to show off your vocabulary and your diction, and they never tell you about the passive voice or the active voice. And she was like, this is how you write a story, this is how you communicate, you forget all this nonsense, this is how you do it. And I was like, oh. So, you know, that got me to study creative writing at university. And then obviously, coming out of university with a humanities degree, I was a useless member of society. So I worked in call centres for a while, but when I actually sat my butt down at the turn of the millennium, I thought, right, I'm turning 30, it's a whole new millennium, I better write this bloody novel or shut up about it.
Yeah.
And of course I went for science fiction.
Oh, brilliant. So it was something you kind of came back to after hating corporate jobs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I fairly similar, but without the whole Diana Wynne-Jones thing. I was a huge, enormous fan of libraries as a kid. We came from an extremely working class, not very well off family. So our weekly reward / adventure was every Saturday morning the family would go to the library, and we would go and we would check out a bunch of books, and we would read them all, and then we'd go back the next week. And so, you know, books and reading and libraries have always been like massively formative for me. I always wanted to tell stories and to write stories. And it was always my favorite subject at school. And my best friend, who is now my sister-in-law, when we were 14, we were having one of those, what are you going to be when you finish school conversations? And I said, I want to be an author. And her exact response was, you'll do it. I know you'll do it. And she was the only person who ever said that to me.
Yeah.
And so here we are, you know, 30 years later. So like many of us, I suspect, I wrote some very melodramatic poetry in my teenage years, which will never see the light of day, and quite rightly so. And then I pretty much started on fantasy. I do have one extremely bad science fiction novel hidden in my desk, which, again, if the house was burning down, I would not save it. So it was that bad. But yeah, it was always fantasy for me. So that was pretty much where my strengths lie. And yeah, I just love the ability to take real world issues and put them in a fantastical setting, because I find that sometimes you try and talk to a racist family member, for example. We all have them, unfortunately. If you try and talk to them about it, they accuse you of preaching. So what you do is you put it into a story, and you talk about how racism is really bad in the context of this civilization that you've created. And you're doing the same job, but without being accused of being preachy and woke and all the rest of that nonsense. But yeah, I did an Open University literature degree, which had a creative writing element to it. And slightly similar, but not, was at that point I was writing everything in first person. And my creative writing tutor kept giving me sort of the equivalent of C's and B's all the way through. No feedback as to why. And then my very last assignment, I wrote it in third person, and I got 98 out of 100. And I was like, you could have just told me that, dude. Just let me know at the start of the semester, you know. But, and I have written exclusively in third person ever since then. So that was sort of beaten into me. But actually, I write multi POV third person because I find that I like to explore every angle of a particular conflict or challenge or whatever it is that is happening in the world and the setting.
Brilliant. How about yourself?
I think that the notion of deciding to be an author is an interesting one, because I'm not saying that it happened by accident, but it was. I tried to write stuff when I was a kid. The first thing I remember writing for myself was some sort of self-insert Narnia fan fiction. I was about 7. But the problem always was that I'd start something and I'd never work out how to finish it. Repeat through teenage years, etc. I think when I was at sixth form, we had a careers advisor thing, and had a conversation with them and discussed stuff, and then got the feedback afterwards to sort of say, it's like, you would like to be a writer, but you acknowledge that this is unrealistic. It's like, shows you what you know, 17-year-old me. You're a fool. So yeah, I wrote stuff and kept writing stuff, and I was around end of the 2000s, I think. I was working on 3 different things at once, and I was kind of going, I've got too many ideas, I'm bouncing from one to the other, and eventually I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick one, and either I'm going to finish the novel, or I'm going to admit that I've just been making excuses and I can't actually write a novel.
Right.
So I picked one and I finished it, and it was massively overlong and very bad. But I proved that I finished a novel. So then I wrote another novel, which was about half as long and I think probably better. And then I just kept writing novels. And I tried to, so I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a try. I mean, I think the basis of my life's outlook is it's worth a shot. Yeah. So I tried to get an agent the proper way, didn't work.
So you kidnapped one?
Well, not quite. On a website on the internet, author feedback site, I met an author called Luke Skull, and I was giving him feedback on his work, and he very much appreciated the feedback. And then he got picked up by an agent, and then he got a 3-novel book deal. And he said, "Thank you very much for all of your feedback. Would you like me to put in a good word for you with my agent?" He's like, "Yes, please. Thank you very much. That'd be great." And so he did, and he became my first agent. I still had to prove to him that I could write, but it was, you tried the proper way. It didn't work. You make friends with someone, you do them a favour, they do you a favour. Bob's your uncle. Which is similar to how I got writing for Games Workshop, actually, because I live in Nottingham, where Games Workshop is based. So most of my friends have worked for Games Workshop at one point or another, because I'm in the alternative community in Nottingham, and that's just how it works. I was playing a series of games with friends and a friend of a friend, and this friend worked for Games Workshop, and I made a joke to him about, because I had a little group of orcs that I was playing in that game, and I made a joke to him about, the Black Library, which is the Games Workshop publishing arm, they don't want some randomer writing stories about a bunch of orcs going around the galaxy blowing stuff up, do they? And he said, "Well, you're not a randomer, you're a published science fiction author, I'll ask." Now, I had previously that year attempted to get in through the Black Library Open Subs competition, which is where anybody who wants to write for them goes, and you have to write like little 300-word thing and stuff, and they sieve through all these thousands of entries, and then they pick up the people they want to write. And I failed that.
Right.
But I spoke to someone who worked there, who went, "Well, actually, you're already because I had 2 novels out by this point. He said, "You're already a published science fiction author. I'll check." And the answer was apparently yes. So basically, I've cheated.
That's awesome. So much of it seems to be seems very hard to get encouragement early doors with writing, apart from your brilliant friend. And so much of it seems very random, and like there's no clear path to becoming a published writer.
No, it is. I'm not saying it's complete luck, but luck is a must. You have to work, and it helps if you have some ability, but it's complete luck, really. It's very quick example, without meaning to waffle on too much. I was about 10 years ago, I was at an event in London. I was talking to a couple of editors who knew me because I was friends with one of their authors, and it was sort of like a meet and greet public event, editors and authors and just members of the public. I was talking to them, and they were both female, both slightly drunk. This will become relevant in a moment. One of them takes a brochure out of her pocket and shows me, oh, these are the authors that we're publishing next year. And she shows me, and there's like a list of 8 to 10 authors or so, and I'm looking at them. And then she suddenly goes, like, we don't seem to be publishing any women. And they're all men. And she turns to my friend who's standing next to me and says, do you write at all? This is the commissioning editor of a large science fiction and fantasy publishing house who spoke to my friend solely on the basis that they were standing next to me and appeared to be female, standing next to a known author. It's like, and what my friend said was well, no, I write and illustrate children's comic books. If my friend had said, yes, I've just finished a fantasy novel, I suspect this slightly drunk editor would have said, well, here's my email, send it over. People would kill for that sort of opportunity. You don't get direct access to publishers and editors. That's what agents do. But this was just in a social event, standing next to someone she knew was an author. You're just like, oh, I'll ask this person. It's not how it should work, but it's how it does work, or it's how it works a lot of the time. It's not completely who you know, but definitely just sort of being there, being known, meeting people in person, or standing next to someone that they know has far more impact than it should.
Yeah, from the outside, you sort of have this impression of it as being this vast sort of complex system with loads of little guards here and there and everywhere that you can't ever get into unless you go through the...
It is, but like any organisation, nobody really knows what they're doing.
Right.
You know, any human organisation, a bank, a tech company, an army, it's full of individuals who are thinking, I've got a clue what I'm doing. I hope I don't get found out.
Yeah.
And we're all just winging it as hard as we can.
I think luck plays a huge part in it as well, though. It's having the right book ready to go at the right time. I mean, for me, for my debut, it was when Grimdark had kind of hit pretty big at that point, and I was querying Godblind, and there was the agent who I now have, Harry. I was following him on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. And he put out a manuscript would like to meet, you know, and it was something that is similar to Joe Abercrombie. And I thought, I mean, it's kind of grimdark. I wouldn't, you know, I'm not going to turn around and say, hi, I'm the new Joe Abercrombie. But it wasn't a million miles away from that. And he said, currently looking for. So I just thought, take a punt. So I just emailed him, cover letter, synopsis, opening 10,000 words. Emailed it off, sent it off. Didn't check my email for a week. Don't do this. Because I had a response after 2 days saying, please send me the full manuscript. Oh, no. When I finally saw it, I thought, that's it. It's done. It's over. My one chance. But fortunately, he was very gracious, and I just sent a groveling apology that I hadn't seen his email for a few days, and sent it over. And that was how I got my agent. But it was very much in the trenches, doing the work. I had my wish list of agents, and just checking their websites, checking their Twitter feeds, like their updates all the time. Are they open for subs? Are they open for subs? What are they looking for?
Yeah.
And you know, if I hadn't have written that particular book, I don't think Harry would have taken me, because that was the specific vibe and feel that he was going for.
Yeah.
And I think that does have a bearing on today's market, because today's market is so heavily romance based at the moment. This romantasy trend that has blown up. It's incredibly difficult for people who write anything else to get a look in. It needs to be absolutely exceptional and stand out and marketable.
Right.
Whereas before, you could have something that was a little bit quirky, a little bit niche, a little bit weird, didn't quite fit in neatly into a box, but people would take it because that was publishing at the time. It was a lot broader.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's incredibly narrow. And it means that there are so many great writers who are just getting rejected left, right, and centre, because they're just chasing the next big romance fantasy.
That must be hard when so many of them it'll be their first novel. You know, you get so many rejections for your first novel. A lot of people will naturally sack it off and just say, right, well, I guess
Yeah,
it's not for
yeah.
me.
Or people like me who are solidly in the mid list and don't write romance heavy work and
Yeah.
currently have a book out on submission that nobody wants because it's not fitting within this neat little package that they're looking for.
It's
Yeah.
become very sales driven. That a lot of publishing decisions are made essentially by the sales team.
Right.
Like the editors go along and say, I want to buy this book. The sales team sit there and they do their calculation.
These tropes aren't selling.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And having just remembered that this is recorded, I would like to say that all the publishers I work with are deeply competent.
No complaining. We're not complaining at all.
I mean, to be fair, I think I'm already on record, so I'm already doomed.
It is. Do you think it goes like, like with the late 90s slasher film sort of thing, like Scream hits, suddenly all you get is clean slasher films, and then people get a bit sick of it, and then it'll die off.
Yeah, you had urban fantasy, so coming in on a similar level actually. My first novel that went from the agent that went to publisher was urban fantasy, and it got all the way to the final acquisition speed. And the response was, we like it and we would buy it, but we already have 3.
Right.
And it was, I just got in a bit too late.
Yeah.
I'd missed the boom of urban fantasy, and now it was people were starting to draw back on it. And you still get stuff like the Dresden Files that's still going, but most of it people weren't getting new stuff, so I just missed it. I was just too late. Then I went back with Dark Run, my first sci-fi novel, and that managed to land. But yeah, you had urban fantasy, steampunk had a brief blip, and then went again, disappeared, never to be seen again. Grimdark sort of I think that sort of started to tail off a bit. And now romantasy is the all-consuming ogre, which I say that, some of it's obviously very good, but it is the thing of it just swamps out everything else.
Yeah.
But it will at some point. I've already heard rumours that we are.
The bubble is bursting. They keep on saying it, and then every day it's, we've acquired a new romantasy trilogy. We've acquired this. So.
Surely there's a Sarah Maas TV show in the works that's going to bump it up again. And,
probably.
Who knows?
But yeah, I mean, I think romantasy is always going to have a massive market share now that they know how big it is. But I think what is happening is an awful lot of really good epic fantasy writers, sci-fi writers. They're publishing independently, and that is where you can find a lot of the most exciting fiction at the moment that is not romantasy. And I think, there has been a trend in the last few years where publishers will see an independent writer who is doing really well and has got really big readership, and they will then pick them up and republish their work traditionally. So I think there's going to be more of that, because as they are going to have to, we hope, start to diversify their market again at some point. So I think it will happen, but I think romantasy is always going to be really popular now.
Is this one of those things where it's like it's another thing that's kind of blind chance, where you can't really predict, because it obviously would take a year or so to write a novel.
Yeah.
You can't really predict what's going to be popular.
Do you think you can try, but you're probably wrong.
Do you think writing to market is kind of a bad idea?
Unless you can write really, really quickly, because even if it takes you a year to write the novel, it then has to go through the publisher process, which can take another year. So you're looking 2 years out. So if you're trying to write what's popular now, you're very, very unlikely to still be that popular. Otherwise I would have banged out a series of romantasy that would all be coming out this year.
How long does it take you to write a novel?
Between 6 to 8 months.
How about you guys? Is that sort of your? No, it's not a race or anything.
I think I could do a first terrible draft in 4 months, but then it'd take me another 4 to 6 to polish it up, and I have this terrible writing process where I write an entire book and I go, oh no, that's not the story I'm telling, and then I have to write an entire second book which doesn't include any of that rubbish, and so I have to write the book in order to learn what it is not about. So I for every project I have the draft, and then I have a cut scenes document, which is everything that I take out and I save for later just in case it's relevant. So for example, the last book that came out published, The Dark Feather, it was 187,000 words long, published,
Yeah.
My cutscenes document was 164,000 words long. So I write a book, go, nope, not that, and then I rewrite it. So for me, it takes a little bit longer. So yeah, I couldn't write a book in 3 months and get it published and write to market.
Would you be tempted to do like a Stephen King director's cut sort of edition? And
Oh my God, no. That stuff is awful.
Is it just like it's cut for a reason?
It's cut for a reason, definitely. It's plot lines that don't go anywhere or character choices that you think, oh, but what if they did this? Oh, why did I think that was a good idea? And so taking things out like that. There's some stuff in there that I think that's a really nice piece of dialogue that's definitely going to come in handy in the second draft. Or I really like that action scene, or something like that. But in general, the stuff that is cut, 90% of it remains cut.
Yeah. You guys find writing science fiction and fantasy, you're sort of, does it feel like you're making life hard for yourself a little bit in terms of having to create an entire world? Do you not sometimes think, why don't I just write a psychological thriller? I'll set it on the street down the way.
No, quite the opposite, because having just been writing a spy thriller, it's so much more difficult.
Oh, really?
You have to know stuff about the real world.
Oh, yeah.
And we live in caves and we don't know anything about the real world.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, when I wrote, you mentioned my novel Macaque, which is set in a slightly different world where England and France merged after the Suez Crisis, the first single picture state, and how Europe went on after that. And at one point, bear with me, the monkey flies a Spitfire under the motorway junction, the Bath motorway junction on the M5, right, to escape a predator drone, and then turns around and flies back under it again. And then shortly after it's published, I drove under there, and oh, there are lampposts. Which I hadn't factored in. So yeah, I got away with that because it was a parallel world where they had lampposts there.
Yeah.
Very specific parallel world, no lamp.
Yeah.
Or just not those specific
Everything else is-
lampposts.
yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the sci-fi, I can just make up whatever I need for the story.
Yeah.
And by explaining as little as possible, it makes it seem more plausible.
Yeah.
Because if I knew how a hyperspace engine worked, I'd be working for NASA. I wouldn't be a writer.
Yeah.
So, but if I think, right, I need the purpose of the story, I need this person to come from this kind of background and this kind of society. So I just invent that society.
Oh, okay. So do most of your books start that way, where you start with a character and then you build the world out around them?
I start with an idea and a character.
Yeah.
So for the Embers of War story, I thought I was reading something, I think it was in National Geographic, about the Titanic.
Right.
And how it wasn't the biggest liner disaster, or the first, but it was the first where they had a radio.
Oh, okay.
So before that, they would just sail off into the North Atlantic
Yeah.
and never be heard of again.
Oh, right.
And nobody ever knew what happened, because at that point, being in the middle of the North Atlantic, you might as well have been on the far side of the moon.
Yeah, yeah.
Having had that thought, I thought, oh, what if they were on the far side? And I thought, so sort of related that to space travel, and then thought, nowadays, they get on the radio, you get a plane, a helicopter, everything coming out. So I thought, let's put that in space. And then I thought, oh, I've just reinvented Thunderbirds. But yeah, I sort of ran with it from there and came up with this kind of rescue organisation in space. And I thought it would be there, and it would be ex-military personnel. Thought, let's introduce a bit of conflict, so ex-military personnel. So I invented a war that they'd all just fought. Yeah. And split them into two sides. And then I have the character of Trouble Dog, who's the battleship, who accidentally developed a conscience and resigned, because you can't have a battleship with a conscience. And she's joined this to try and atone for what she did during the war, so I had to invent an atrocity. And then that atrocity became like the key moment in all the characters' lives. The way they reacted or dealt with it became the driving engine of the story. So
okay. How about yourself? Do you go world first or character first, or are you sort of plotting first?
Mine tends to be character first.
Yeah.
So I will, if I'm sort of thinking, oh, what should I write after this current book? I'll start thinking about, well, what sort of person, what sort of archetype do I want to write about this time? And I mean, the inspiration for that can come from absolutely anywhere. One of the main characters in the Songs of the Drowned trilogy, Shessa, that came from a dream that I had, and the only thing I could remember when I woke up was the image of a pair of bare feet standing by the bank of a river, and that was it. And sort of there was like sort of lush foliage just like next to their feet and stuff like that. So I thought, okay, well, what does that tell me? It tells me that the environment is warm enough that you don't need to wear shoes or boots. The foliage was very lush, which would suggest potentially some sort of tropical climate, and water is going to be really important. And that then I extrapolated that out, and that became Shessa, who was a deaf warrior with a service dog who fought water monsters.
Yeah.
And so it all came from there. But I mean, I've got a short story that I've got planned out for an anthology that is due at the end of this year. And that the whole idea for that came from me misreading something on the internet.
Right.
I can't even remember what it was supposed to say, but what I read it as was West of the Demon. And so my brain went, West of the Demon, that's a cool, what does that mean? And I then turned that into a nursery rhyme. So in the vein of like Ring a Ring of Roses is a really cute, nice little thing about the bubonic plague. So I was like, well, West of the Demon, if you turn that into like a little ditty with the compass points, then if it's a nursery rhyme, what is it doing? It is teaching you something important in a nice way. So I've now got a horror story about demons and fae that I need to write in 6 weeks, 5 weeks. But no pressure. But yeah, it's for me, it's a seed of an idea, and then I let my brain become whimsical and just play with it. And I think it's amazing the dark stuff that can come out of whimsically playing with words and ideas and stuff like that. But yeah, it's usually 99% of the time. This is an outlier, but it's 99% of the time character first for me.
Yeah.
And then I'll put them in an environment, and then a story will suggest itself based on who they are and the world that they're in.
Brilliant. Do you find it very different working with Warhammer in terms of like someone else's established world?
Yeah, it's
more of a challenge, or is it fun to play with?
I like the contrast, because with Warhammer, it's essentially it's plug and play.
Yeah.
Because I've been playing the games for 30 years or more.
Yeah.
So I know the background, and I knew the background when I started writing for them. And all the world building, or most of the world building stuff, is already established. Yeah. So I can just sit down and write a story in a world I know, and not have to think about how everything works, because they've already done that. Yeah. And when I wrote the Kaiko series, I sat down and thought, well, how I want there to be faster than light travel, because that makes the story more expansive. But I don't just want it to be sort of, throw a switch hyperdrive. Right. So I looked into it, and it was like, there's the Alcubierre drive theoretical concept, which has come up in a couple of places. And I looked into it and said, NASA are researching this. And I was like, well, if NASA are researching it now, then I'm prepared to say, well, maybe in 500 years, someone worked it out. Yeah. That's what it is. The other good thing is they have faster than light travel, but not faster than light communication. So news only spreads as fast as someone can take it. Yeah. So essentially, you can outrun your own bad news. Right. It's like the wanted posters won't get there ahead of you so long as you leave now, which was a little dynamic that I liked. But if I'm writing for Warhammer 40,000, how do the ships fly faster than light? They fly through hell. Right. It doesn't have to make sense to me, because it's already established. I don't have to sit down and go, do I feel this is internally consistent? Because it doesn't matter. It's their universe. So I don't have to work out, what happens to gravity in spaceships? How do they have artificial gravity? We don't know. We don't care. It's established. How do they fly through hell? Meh. How does a bolt gun work? Not my problem. Whereas if I'm making up my own world, I don't have to come up with stuff that is completely scientifically sound, because it won't be, especially if it's fantasy. But I do have to have it in a way that's internally consistent for me, because otherwise it's not going to feel authentic when I write it, because I'm going to be going, how the hell does this work? And you can't tell a story like that. You have to at least make it make sense to you.
Right.
So, but obviously with Games Workshop, I'm working with pre-established characters or factions in a pre-established world. And often there's like, we would like you to write a story about this character, maybe doing this sort of thing, because that fits in with what we want. It's like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Or sometimes, no, I can't do that. Or I don't particularly want to do that because that's not particularly interesting to me, because I'm a freelancer, so I can say yes or no. Whereas with my own stuff, I was trying to think, it's difficult to say where the first idea comes from. My next novel, which is coming out next summer with Titan, this is Where the Future Bleeds, which is a somewhat unwieldy title, but that's because someone is scared of puns and they didn't want it to be called Profit Motive. With I thought it fitted, but I can see why they didn't want to do it. It makes you sound too much like Pratchett, and you don't want to be compared too closely to Pratchett, because that's a comparison you don't want, really, because you won't live up to it. And the idea of that it came from, I don't know where it came from, just this idea that sparked it on my head of like destinies not being physical things, not that find people that you can find, like little thing. And it came, and so that went through a couple of little incarnations that could have been sort of one short story, but then turned into, well, first of all, it was a short story, but I'm rubbish at short stories, so no one wanted to buy the short story. So I expanded the short story into a novel, and that eventually worked. But the thing of the future is damaged, and that's why these things are coalescing in this, and particularly in this area of space, it's essentially timeless, and so you have to have an enchantment to go in and get them, and there's giant wasps that try and eat you, but that's entirely unrelated. And everybody loves the wasps. Everybody who's read it loves the wasps, and it really surprised me. It's like the wasps is the thing that everybody mentions about this as Reddit so far. So the future is damaged, and people can go up, and if you're a diviner, like sort of water diviner, you can find these destinies, and then you can sell them on, and then obviously the rich people buy the best destinies, and it became a metaphor for capitalism and all that sort of. So I don't even know where that came from. That was just an idea that popped into my head, and I scribbled down and turned into a thing. The Gold King Chronicles came from Brexit, because I got really angry about the Brexit vote.
That's the only good thing that has come out of Brexit.
I'm not saying that it's one for me. I got really angry about the Brexit vote, and I wanted to write a novel about culture clash, but where cultures learned from each other and became better rather than becoming xenophobic and trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
And they had to be forced into it. There's like sort of a situation as to why these two small groups of representatives from the various cultures had to work together or they would die. But I just wanted to write a thing that was actually, difference is good, and you can learn, and you can take things from each other's cultures, and this can be a good thing. You don't have to hate each other. And that was the impetus for the Gold King Chronicles. Some of the background vibes came from the fantasy novel that I've been writing in my head since I was a teenager in the 90s. Very few things survived apart from Marwyn and his murder husband. Who they were in there to begin with, and that's about the only thing that's come through to the final draft, apart from a couple of the country names, I think. But that was the story that I always wanted to tell when I was a teenager, and finally I figured I think I'm actually an okay enough author that I can make a decent go of it now. I can make a decent go of a big epic fantasy trilogy. But yeah, Brexit was the thing that kickstarted it, because the other main storyline in there became the thing of wanting to write about cultures that actually could learn from each other.
And
So
sadly, still very relevant with all these bloody flags from all the.
Don't get me started on that.
The racist roundabouts we now have. Is that a thing that's important to all of you in terms of sci-fi and fantasy? Is the way you can comment on the world as it is by showing them. Like for science fiction, for example, could it be sort of an early warning system for the abuses of technology and that kind
I mean, there's an old saying that sci-fi is always about the time when it's written.
of?
Right back, George Orwell swapping the 4 and the 8 around when he was typing in 1984. Yeah, I think that's the great thing is you can comment on any aspect of society by setting up a society that works in that particular way,
Yeah.
and then buggering it up to say, well, this is what's going to happen if, or alternatively, set one up that works very well and say, well, this could, look how good this is. I mean, Star Trek does that very well.
Yeah.
You've got the Star Trek sort of moneyless, scarcity socialist utopia. I think I wrote a novel called Descendant Machine, which again was a Brexit novel.
Yeah.
And it's about this alien race who's discovered this giant mechanism, and they want to open it because their leader tells them it will make them great again and lead them to sunlit uplands, and other people think it will destroy the galaxy. So they have to kind of figure out whether they should let them open this. It becomes there's this whole political movement of open the machine. That's the central conflict of the novel, is the people trying to stop them from it. It's funny how that things seep in. I mean, I did another novel called Stars and Bones. It's a horror novel, but at the beginning there's almost a nuclear apocalypse. I wrote that because that was my childhood nightmare.
Yeah.
And when I wrote it, I thought this is a bit far fetched. I started writing it in 2019, but then when it was published, it was the next day Putin rolled the tanks into Ukraine, and I thought maybe it isn't as far fetched as I thought it was. And that's kind of the apocalypse is triggered by an idiot British Prime Minister making a remark when he thinks his microphone's off. He was obviously based on someone I think we can all guess who that was.
I think, from my point of view, it's like when I left university, I ended up working for a homelessness charity for 15 years, which was not my intended route. I'd intended to become a journalist, but that didn't work. And so I ended up working for a homelessness charity. And if you start working for a homelessness charity at the age of 22, probably not in every case, but certainly in my case, you become rabidly socialist.
Yeah.
And very, very angry about the injustices of society done by the privileged against the underprivileged and the discriminated against. And so that kind of features of power, abuses of power, balance of power, redistribution of power is the sort of thing that I like to write about when I can.
Yeah.
Because it was a massively impactful period of my life. And I ended up being able to make enough money from writing to not have to work at the homelessness charity anymore, which is very nice because I definitely don't regret doing it, but I'm also glad that I don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah.
It's the thing, that was a good experience. That was a good experience for me, but I'd rather not go back. Thank you very much. I have, fewer drug overdoses to deal with now.
I think it's interesting how themes recur in a particular author's writing. It's obviously something that's quite important, that, like you were talking about, class and wealth and power and stuff like that.
And markets for some reason. I keep putting markets in stuff.
I have no answer to that.
Well, nor do I don't know why.
But I mean, something that keeps coming up in my work is sort of class and particularly people who think that they have the answers to everything and they're right, and therefore they get to tell everyone else how to live their lives. And if you take that to its furthest extreme, you get colonization. So that is something that sort of recurs quite a lot in my writing, is this idea of I know you better than you know you, and actually you're wrong about everything that is fundamental to you as an individual, and this is who you should worship, this is the rule, these are the rules that you should follow, these are the laws that will make you a better person. And you know, it's a very unsubtle indictment of the British Empire, basically.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that as I've gone further through my writing career, and I look back on the common themes that are in all of my books, and in the book that's on submission at the moment, and in the book I'm currently drafting, and I'm like, oh, there it is again. Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it is probably does come from being working class and raised as a working class person, and still am a working class person, and that kind of. I made an effort to try and read some working class fiction, and by the time I'd read the fourth one about it was a broken home and somebody died of a drug overdose, and you know they were living in a tenement building, and you know someone ate their dog or whatever, you know what, and I was just like, that's not my childhood.
Yeah.
That was not how I lived. I mean, you know, my dad was a firefighter, and he had a second job as a painter and decorator because we couldn't make ends meet. My mom was she did a variety of part-time jobs when me and my sister were young. We delivered telephone directories back in the 80s.
Oh,
it was like you got 2 pence per telephone directory that you delivered, and we had them stacked through the house every winter. And we used to go out after school every single day, little trolleys, and deliver all these telephone directories, just, you know, in order to pay for Christmas and stuff like that. But my parents didn't split up. Neither of them are alcoholics. No one in my extended family has had a drug overdose. No one has committed suicide. And it's very much, publishing is extremely white, extremely heterosexual, and extremely middle class.
Yeah.
And so they say, oh, we want a working class novel. Trauma will have that one.
Yeah.
Nobody just wants a story about a happy working class family who go to the library every Saturday morning and, you know, instill a love of books in their children. And you see it across all marginalizations. You know, we want a book about Black people.
Yeah.
Well, if it's not traumatic, we're not going to buy it. We don't
Right.
want a book about, you know, if you're not, oh, look, it's a book about an angry Black woman, we're not going to have that. Or, you know, we want a book about Central American people. Well, if it doesn't involve drugs and cartels, we're not going to buy it. And it's so narrow-minded. And I think the more diverse people who work at publishing houses can become, the more books they're going to take on. And the more you can see yourself in the books you read, the better that is for everybody, I think.
Just they're sort of, you have them sort of treating working class fiction as like this little thing they're putting in a corner in a zoo, and it's like, oh, look at how rubbish their lives are.
Yeah,
that sort of
precisely.
thing.
Point and stare.
Yeah.
Poverty porn.
That's the one. Yeah, I was trying to think.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a. Yeah, that's the one.
Do you think fantasy and science fiction is helpful in that way, in terms of you can, you know, explore different experiences and create the world in such a way to highlight things like social injustice and the abuses of, you know, what we have now. We don't need sci-fi for billionaires, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think 100%. You know, the grand tradition of fantasy has always been about, you know, the chosen one, the farm boy who goes on to become the king and has zero experience, but somehow knows how to do it. And I think there is space, because we are creating worlds from scratch. We can tell anything, any story that we want to tell. And I think it's easy to say that writers have a duty to do that, and we don't. But if it's something that we're interested in, then I think we deserve a shot at having those stories put out there, you know, and instead of, you know, the farm boy who goes on to become the king, why not have a king who gives up everything and goes off to be a gardener? You know, I mean, why not tell stories like that?
Yeah.
And tell the small stories. It doesn't always need to be empire building or world ending or, you know, big.
I think what it can do as well very effectively is, I think the right way to other our everyday reality, in that we read about these other societies and how they work, but then if you switch it round and then have those characters looking at our society, and then we can look at ourselves with fresh eyes through them.
Yeah.
Ian Banks did it very effectively with two books. With The Player of Games, he has a character from the culture travel to this society and describe how brutal it is and how sticky it is, and how at one point the main characters realizing that the citizens that only escape is ethanol and they're drinking it.
Right.
And he says they even have to pay for that. And he's flabbergasted that they have to pay to ease their own pain through alcohol. And he did it in another one called The State of the Art, where a culture ship encounters the Earth in 1978, I think it is. And they kind of wander around looking at what humans are doing. And, you know, the people studying the economic systems all have nervous breakdowns. And and they're just wandering around looking at the history of this place and how hideous it is.
Yeah.
And then one character becomes a Catholic and decides it's the whole point of it is it's really nice because you get to die. And you don't live for hundreds of years like the culture people do. And so somehow that makes it special, but it does make you sort of look at the world as if you're looking at a science fiction society and applying that same kind of question.
I think it sounds like an obvious thing to say, but it depends on who's writing it and what they decide to do. Because if you're writing science fiction and fantasy and you're creating a new world, a new society, everything that you put in there is a choice, which means that I think you have a duty to be very careful about what choices you make, and you don't just default. So if you're writing a fantasy novel, the classic, I guess, fantasy is like sort of pseudo Western Europe medieval. That's sort of what a lot of people think of: castles, swords, knights, maybe, or things that are like knights called something slightly different. And so a lot of people who do that will also default to patriarchy, so subjection of women, queerness being taboo, racism, if even there is anybody of a different ethnic group there, because obviously no one ever traveled back in medieval times. And so
you get like elves and things which are very racially coded.
Yeah, that too. And it's that feels like the default, because God knows I read however many fantasy novels as a kid that were like that. But it's not a default. It doesn't have to be a default. It's one of the things I try to do with the Godkin Chronicles is I have one society that's quite homophobic and one society that's quite patriarchal. And they just bump up against each other. And in the end, they sort of start to, neither one of them is willing to let go of their own privileges rather than adopting the biases of the other side. So they both kind of force each other to become better. And it feels like a slightly blunt way of doing it, but it was a thing of like, look, this is not the default. This is not how every human society in the history of the earth was. They didn't all go through sexism, queerphobia, that sort of stuff. Some did, a lot didn't, or not in the same way, not at the same times. It's not a default. If you're making a world and you choose to put that stuff in, that's fine, so long as you know why you're doing it and you're not just defaulting to doing it because you think that is how it is or how it was, because you're creating something entirely new. I read a debut fantasy novel earlier this year, which I will not name. Anyway, it was well told. But I went through the entire thing, however 400, 500 pages or whatever. There was not a single mention of a queer character at all. I was like, I mean, okay, maybe there's a reason for that, and it's not, I mean, despite being a queer person myself, it's not like I'm going to throw well, there's nothing like me in here, I'm going to throw this away. But it was the thing of, well, I think that tells me something about the mindset of the person who wrote it. Not necessarily that they were deliberately did it, but is that, well, their image of the world doesn't contain people like me, unless they're thinking about it consciously. And I think that is I mean, I'm a white, middle class, middle aged, university educated person. I have a lot of privileges, but I am partly disabled. I'm partially deaf. I'm disabled to an extent, and I am queer. I have some marginalizations, and so it is a thing of. It can be a bit confronting when you're reading something that somebody has created from whole cloth. Yeah. They've just completely themselves without any, well, what you were saying of real world things, if you have to get right because this was for the period or whatever, and just go, well, clearly, if you're imagining a world, you don't imagine me in it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that if you're creating a world, it doesn't have to be a big part. It can just be a sentence here or there that makes the reader aware that this thing exists here. And it's not the focus of the story. It doesn't have to be central in the story, but it's there. And so then you go, okay, well, maybe this story just isn't about that, rather than you have not considered this at all. Mm. And I think that the stories that cling to the kind of the mid-20th century cis-het white male author viewpoint run the risk of reinforcing those stereotypes that this is what this fiction is about and pushing away wider experiences.
Yeah. I'm guilty of doing it myself, where I've my wife has read my book and I've put in like mindset in Manhattan, and I've put in like mafia characters, and she's just like, you've just written Luca Brasi, you've just taken a character from The Godfather and gone, oh, and it's so easy when you're writing or trying to write at speed, I guess, take these kinds of shortcuts.
I think that's something that comes with experience, though.
Yeah,
is the more you write and the more that you are edited, the more it sort of trains you to pick up. Am I being a little bit lazy here? Am I choosing a stereotype because it's easier and it will get me to the end of the chapter? And you know, maybe my intention is that I will come back and fix it in the next draft, but you know, we do all have our blind spots. We are all a product of our culture, and it can be easy to let things slide that you think it's good enough instead of being good.
Yeah.
Just jumping back in very briefly, pulling on blind spots, is that certainly I undoubtedly still do to some extent, but certainly when I was a younger author and I was writing, I was using terminologies or descriptions that I had read in books that I'd read when I was younger, assuming that this was the correct way to describe things or describe people, and it was not. But I didn't know that because I'd maybe not encountered many people from that particular ethnic group, or certainly not had discussions with them about how they like to be physically described or not physically described. And so there's a couple of descriptions in the Kaiko novels of character skin color, which is referencing in relation to foodstuffs, which is not a thing that you should do. I didn't know that at the time. Yeah. One of the problems I have is I'm colorblind as well, which means that I couldn't actually describe someone's skin color to save my life. I don't even know what color my own skin is.
The pale puce.
What the f is puce? Puce isn't a real thing. It's like I know about 8 colors and I can't see half of them. So if I'm trying to describe stuff, I'm working from what other people have described stuff as, because I don't know what the hell color it is. If I ask someone, what color are rhododendron flowers? It's like, it could be anything from pink to purple. Okay, well, that actually helps. But I had to, I realized when I was writing Gold King Chronicles, I realized that I can't see when white people blush. I'm colorblind to red. I can't see cheeks changing color to imply that you're embarrassed or hot or whatever. And I realized that I also don't know whether people of darker skin tones flush when they're embarrassed. And then I remembered something from Blade 2, where Ron Perlman's very obnoxious character makes a comment to Blade of, "Can you blush?" And I was like, that was coded, I think, as a racist comment. Does this mean that people with darker skin tones, their faces don't change color when they're embarrassed? So I actually had to ask a friend of mine from South Asian heritage. I was like, I'm writing a character with a similar skin color to yours. Do your cheeks change color when you're embarrassed? Because I can't tell. I can't even tell when white people's cheeks colors change color, and I know they do. And he said, no, they don't, which is really useful sometimes. It's like, okay, cool. So when I'm writing this character, I won't mention that their cheeks change color when they're getting embarrassed. But but that was partially a cultural blind spot. I mean, I'm from Suffolk, for crying out loud. I did not know. I think I went through entire primary school without seeing a single other kid that wasn't white. But also, I literally can't see some stuff because I'm colorblind. So when it comes to describing stuff like skin tone and things, I can't do it myself.
Yeah.
Which means I have to use other people's descriptions to get it kind of accurate. And if those descriptions were written by people who were careless or were racist or just didn't know that what they were doing would be taken badly by the people of whom they were describing, if I follow those, I'm doing the same thing, and I'm not doing it intentionally, but I'm still doing it. It's like, and this is why stuff like knowing a wide variety of people is useful. Doing research with AI, that's becoming increasingly more difficult because it just messes up all the research results. And sensitivity readers are a very important resource, which do cost money, unfortunately. But if you are writing particularly about a real world culture, ethnicity, religion, anything like that, that you do not have direct personal experience of, finding someone who will, for money, read your novel and go, this is where you don't do this. They are invaluable for picking up stuff to make sure that you do not accidentally offend people.
Yeah, because that's a real fear of like when you're writing something, you feel like you have a responsibility for people you put in your book. I'm from a tiny village in Wales. We have no black people in North Wales, where I'm from, and you feel like, you know, if I'm going to write a black character, do I have the right to do that, or how do I do that in a way that's respectful and I'm not doing it from the point of view of someone who didn't grow up with black friends and that kind of thing? So is that the way around it with sensitivity readers, just by not being a little hobbit and living in a little...
I mean, also consume media from a wide variety of origins. Which is,
for example.
yeah, I mean, with like streaming services these days, obviously they all cost a bomb these days, and you get adverts. But you can watch TV made by people, not just about, but made by people from all around the world, and you can really get an idea of, you get much broader scope of influences. So you can, consuming things from a wide variety of origins is good in media anyway, because it broadens your horizons, it can give you all sorts of new ideas yourself, but it also means that you're exposed to how different cultures tend to think. I ended up watching a load of sea fantasy dramas in lockdown, as everybody did.
We all.
Yeah, and noticing a very different way of how stories are structured in like Chinese origin stuff, and how they all do, as you know, Bob. It's like, oh yes, this clan, the clan that are known for their horses, and there's like these two characters who already know this stuff, just talking to each other to get information over to the audience, and that is they're very definitely frowned upon in Western storytelling, because we have this thing of show don't tell. And I think it was Adrian talked about that once. He just said, well, I just do all the telling. I just do paragraphs of telling, because he's doing like science stuff. And so, but that is normal in those sorts of storytelling cultures. Or so, again, I don't want to make generalization, but it's certainly a lot more normal. And it's fine. But so you watch these things and you go, it's a different way of telling a story. It's not one I'm familiar with, and it feels a little bit alien to me in some ways, the way like character arcs and all this sort of stuff. But it's new and it's different, and it gives me some understanding of stuff.
Can I ask you, Gareth, how do you deal with the as you know Bobs? Is there it seems that there's a fine line between too much world building up front and you don't want to sit down, use everything that's happened in the last 100 years. How do you weave it in a way that is...
I approach it as if I was writing a book set today. And the character decided to go to Sainsbury's.
Right.
So he left his house, got into his car, drove to Sainsbury's. If I'm writing a sci-fi novel, I don't want to have to explain the whole of Western capitalism. I don't want to have to explain the internal workings of the combustion engine.
Right.
I don't want to have to explain how he drives. I don't want to have to explain the OPEC oil crisis, and the switch to electric cars and greenhouse effect. I just want the character to get in the car and drive. So.
Right.
And so when I'm writing science fiction, I kind of write it as if I'm writing at the time.
Okay.
So they get into the spaceship, they press the button and make the spaceship go whoa, and they go whoa. I don't sit there and explain how the spaceship works because as far as they're concerned, it's just like getting into a car.
Yeah.
And, you know, I might have a sentence here or there that indicates how it works.
Yeah.
Or, indicates what the limits are of it. But the other thing I bear in mind is the first Star Wars movie, the one that came out in 1977. And when Luke is sitting in Ben Kenobi's house, he says, "You fought in the Clone Wars?" And Kenobi's like, yeah, as did your father. And they never mention the Clone Wars again in the whole film. And we're all sitting there like 7 years old going, what the fuck are the Clone Wars? That sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
And then he says, oh, a Jedi Knight like your father. What are Jedi Knights? And you don't find out a lot of that stuff in that first film. But it makes the universe feel much bigger.
Yeah.
Because they're talking about things that everyone knows but that aren't explained. So I try to drop, especially in the Embers of War, people talked about the world building in there. And some of it, I don't want to spoil the illusion, but occasionally I just dropped a name in that was quite suggestive, like a ship from the Goblet Cluster.
Right.
I don't know what that is, but it sounds quite evocative. So it just makes the universe feel a bit bigger.
Yeah. Brilliant. Should we take questions from you guys? I've hugged you long enough. Does anybody have any questions at all?
Just kind of the question on the back of that. From what you were just saying, Gareth, but the interesting thing is there needs, as far as I'm concerned, there needs to be a balance. I'm struggling at the moment trying to read Neuromancer because, like, from page one all the way through it, there's so much, there's everything, and he doesn't patronize with lots of exposition, but I'm lost. I'm going to need to read it again in 10 years, I think. So how do you deal with that kind of balance? Because,
well, I'm not clever enough, so I'm writing fairly simple things to understand. I wouldn't, for instance, have a character basically experiencing the whole of the internet without explaining what it was. In 1984, I mean, that was a nightmare. So, I'm explaining spaceships, just things that are needed for the story. I wouldn't delve into something that complex and play fair with the reader. Not to say he's not. Hi, Bill, if you're watching. But words there.
No, I mean, I read Neuromancer and I went, okay, I think there was a heist in there, but I'm not sure what they were stealing, and I don't know if they got it, but I kind of enjoyed the journey, and that was sort of my experience of it. But I think there is a balance that you need to find, and I think, particularly speaking from a fantasy perspective, there is a tendency to invent strange words for everyday objects.
Yes.
So, for example, in the Songs of the Drowned trilogy, we have jaguars, actual, not the car, the cat, and we could, I could have called those if I wanted to. I could have just made up a name, but then I would have to describe what it looked like, and everyone would go, "Oh, it's a jaguar." So why not just call it a jaguar? So I think quite often we, as writers, we have the tendency to try and overcomplicate things. If it's got long ears and a little nose and a little cotton tail and it hops around eating grass, call it a rabbit or a hare. Don't overcomplicate things. If there are concepts that need to be explained, I think you can just get away with a paragraph or two of exposition. It's when you end up with 5,000 words of exposition which details the history of the world and the factions and who believes in what god and why they're at war and stuff like that, that's when it becomes a problem. So what you want to do is just, when it's necessary, drop in a paragraph that gives that detail and then go straight back into the character story. That would be my advice.
I find as well it's the translation thing. If you're telling the whole story in English, you might as well translate those words as well.
Yeah.
So it's like the Daleks on Doctor Who. They speak English all the way through it, apart from when they're telling the time. And they go, this will happen in 40 rells. You know, I mean, why not just translate that to seconds? It's just, but yeah, it's in my book, Future's Edge, I mentioned some of the local wildlife on this planet. And they're not important to the story, they don't really appear. So I just called them Komodo lions. So you get an idea of a Komodo dragon and a lion, you think, yeah, you know, I haven't explained it, but you get the idea that it's probably not something you want to run across. So,
yeah. Stephen Arion talked about that when he was talking about his Nightingale and the Falcon books, which are set in the ancient Mongolian Empire. And he was talking about, well, they didn't have, I've called them captains, they were called something else, but I'm not going to make you learn words for every different rank that they had in their army. I'll just call them captains in general, and you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think the translation thing is like, if we assume that, how I started this sentence in the right place. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to park that and come back to it. When I write it, I find that it's difficult. I sometimes get lost down a rabbit hole of where a word comes from. I don't want, if I'm writing in English, I don't want to use loan words like déjà vu.
Right.
Because if I'm writing in English about a completely different world, certainly not have characters saying déjà vu, because then they're speaking French. Right. And it's like, and we're working on the basis that I am translating what they're doing into English for everybody to read.
Yeah.
Only I'm not doing an appendix like Tolkien did at the end of Lord of the Rings. But then if they start speaking in French, why am I not translating that as well? Right. And so, but then trouble is my brain then goes down the rabbit hole of where do all these words originate from? Like because déjà vu is French that we use. There's a whole bunch of words, obviously, that come sometimes fairly recently from other languages which we use. As like, okay, where do I draw the line here? Like, if we're talking, what was the word? Like, say something Stygian. That's a word that comes from Greek mythology. Do I want to use that? I don't have Greek mythology here because there's no Greeks. How far do you trim back your adjectives? What I don't want to do is stuff like David Eddings in the Eleni, the trilogy that came after the Malorian and the Belgariad. He's got a character who has a Lochaber axe. Lochaber is a place in Scotland. The axe is called that because it comes from Lochaber. It's not a description of an axe type. There's no Scotland in this world. Why do you have a Lochaber axe? And there was the Komodo thing reminded me. I really love the Lady Trent novels, but this is set in a secondary world similar to our own, but it is not our own. Very definitely not our own. And at one point, she makes reference to Komodo dragons. And it's like, well, you may as well have just described the Californian sea lion. Right. Because it's a creature that is named after the island where it is found. And so, yeah, the problem I have is trying to work out how far I'm willing to go down the not using recognizable real world stuff to describe things, even when does that stuff come from recognizable this world cultures that aren't English, because English is the language that I'm working in to begin with. So that's, that messes my brain up sometimes.
Do you have to set yourself, sorry.
I did read a fantasy short story once where the main character had an Alsatian.
Is Alsatian named after a place?
Yeah.
Right, I didn't know that. In that case, yeah, that's no. That's not done like that.
You have to set yourself, you have to write down rules for yourself in terms of that sort of thing, language and naming. You have story Bibles before you start and that kind of
just vibes.
Do it as you
That's
go.
far too organised for me.
Yeah, it's just...
The great thing about writing in the future is that our present language is where I'm starting from, so I can change bits, but I don't have to watch myself quite as much as although occasionally my editor will say, "No, Gareth, this spaceship in the 42nd century would not know about the VCR."
Maybe in the Hollow Suite it's got one.
Maybe it's a fan of bubbles.
Is it the else?
Quite a few mentions of sort of limitations of mainstream publishing, like marketing first and the diversity limitations. I wondered if you felt that independent publishers helped improve that situation, or whether that just generates.
Well, speaking as someone who's recently co-founded, is running an independent publisher, yes. And no, I think there's definitely a role for independent publishing, and there's definitely a role for self-publishing as well. In that, I think they can be more adventurous in the kind of thing they pick up. Though for a long time, nobody was really publishing novellas, and you had like Ian Waits at Yukon Press was basically flying the flag in the UK for science fiction novella publishing. So from that point of view, I think, and poetry, I think, is a genre as well where independent publishing really is vital because so few places publish poetry in any quantity. So I would definitely say that specialised independent publishers are vital to the kind of the ecosystem that we have, especially in genre.
I think they're a place where you can sort of really cut your teeth as a writer. You know, you can start off with maybe selling some short fiction to some small magazines and stuff like that, and then move on to novellas and stuff. But I think they're also really vital as homes for weird fiction and for stuff that a traditional publisher would look at and go, I don't know how to market this. What is it? You know, and it's like they're holding, you know, a bomb or something. And an independent publisher will take it and go, yeah, that's amazing. No idea if it's going to make any money, but let's publish it and see what happens. And, you know, that sort of experimental fiction is so important for slowly eroding the stranglehold of romantasy and you know, these big sort of homogeneous books that are coming out every which way, and it's all about being commercial and it's all about being marketable and stuff like that, and people want weird sometimes.
Going back to what Mike was saying as well, it's a good home for underrepresented or marginalised groups of writers as well.
But I would point out that it shouldn't have to be.
No, it shouldn't. Yeah.
A lot of writers I know have sort of soundtracks for specific works as they're writing. Do you have any particular music that you feel belongs to any of your books?
I have basically I buy a lot of, I say buy because I don't stream stuff because I'm old fashioned. I buy a lot of soundtracks of movies and TV series, but I just I listen to them, like I just go all the way through. I think I've just got up to Game of Thrones again. Well, more specifically, Ramajwadi. Yeah, I don't listen to stuff with lyrics in because that messes up the words. But I don't think I could write something just listening to one track, or not one track, or one soundtrack in particular. I think I'd get bored of the music and I'd get to know it too well. So even in the back of my head, I'd know what would come next, and I think that would take away the kind of purpose of it, which is to give a almost an ambient background. Even if sometimes it's not ambient, sometimes it's big and explosive because the Avengers are doing stuff. But you know, I just have a lot of. I don't attach anything to any particular thing. I'm just listening to it all the way through and then all the way through again.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
If anyone's on Apple Music, I've made my writing playlists public. I've got like a general writing playlist, a sci-fi writing playlist, spy fiction playlist and stuff, and it's mostly soundtracks or kind of sort of Brian Eno style ambient music or just kind of lo-fi beats, just stuff to keep the nagging part of my brain from going, oh, we should be doing the washing up. It just keeps that bit of my brain quiet. So I also find coffee shop noise is good. You can go onto YouTube and find like an 8-hour video of just coffee shop noise.
Yeah.
And for some reason that screens out that part of the brain as well. But in answer to your question, my novel that's coming out in February next year was pretty much entirely written listening to all the various different Cowboy Bebop soundtracks.
Nice.
So it very definitely has that vibe.
Sorry.
I was just the only other thing I was going to add was that the only time I'll listen to something with lyrics is if it's Japanese rock. So I'm a big fan of the Wagaki band because I've got absolutely no idea what they're talking about because my Japanese is less than rudimentary.
Yeah.
But they've got really big sounds and it's got a obviously a very distinct Japanese flavor to it, which is nice. And I'm also a really big fan of the soundtrack of My Country, the New Age, which is a K-drama on Netflix, which I have watched a non-zero number of times. And if you want a historical epic that has brotherhood and revenge and betrayal and a quest for power and everyone is very beautiful all of the time, it is such good television. It's My Country, the New Age.
Thank you.
Definitely watch it.
I was going to ask about the idea of anyone being able to put out a novel is brilliant and self-publishing is amazing. But it's tricky in that to do that, 90% of the market has to go through Amazon. So it's a weird situation where anybody can have a voice and put out a novel, but you are sending Katy Perry to space while you're doing it. Do you know what I mean? Amazon seems to be the way it's done through KDP and what have you. Are small independent presses like yourselves the answer to that, do you think? To get away from giving Bezos billions?
I think so, because we publish through Ingram.
Yeah.
Which means it's available on Amazon and it's available through gardeners in bookshops and libraries.
Yeah.
So you're not tied to Bezos in the way that you can publish through Amazon KDP.
Yeah.
They can just take your work away.
Yeah.
They can just stop you from selling your book. You have to agree to their whatever bullshit they've got going on that week.
Yeah.
And I think that's only going to get kind of worse. I've heard horror stories from people who are published through there of payments going missing, but the whole book's being taken off sale. And I just wouldn't want to get involved in that kind of that mess because, as I say, it's a monopoly and it could just stop tomorrow.
Yeah. And Spotify doing audiobooks and stuff now. Spotify obviously horrific to creators in lots of ways.
So yeah, I would, if you were self-publishing, try to do it through Ingram or something that will give you more flexibility, or at least be on more than one platform.
Right.
I know a lot of my indie friends. There's been a sort of a little revolution among self-publishing people where they've started selling direct from their own website.
Yeah.
Don't quite know the ins and outs of how it works, but it's basically you buy it from me instead of from Amazon or Kobo or Barnes and Noble or Waterstones or whatever. And it will be the same price as it is on Amazon, but the author gets all of that money instead of just a percentage of that money. So there's been a bit of a push among indies to sort of take that route. And I think that's really important as well, because anything that breaks the stranglehold of Amazon is a good thing.
You just feel a bit dirty.
The horror author Adam Neville did that a few years ago. I think he was slightly ahead of the curve, and he had a big following, so he just retreated and said, right, I'm going to sell my own books. And so I think, I'm not sure if it's through Patreon or something like that, but he sells, so he's got a basic edition, a deluxe edition, a super deluxe edition, at various price points, and he just sells them. He creates them and sells them himself. Because he's got a big following, that works very well for him.
Can I ask you, do you earn enough from writing so you don't have to take on another job? Is that all you do? Just write?
No.
Yes. I'm
Living the dream.
living the dream. This is basically down to the fact that I do contract work for Games Workshop, which is obviously a multi-billion-pound global company, and I write for the Warhammer 40,000 branch of it, which is the futuristic game, which is the big following one, and so they sell an awful lot of books because they have an awful lot of fans. I would not be able to make a living from writing through traditional publishing. The very, very few people can, because they don't pay an enormous amount, and they're also so slow. It's painfully slow. Generally, you get tied into stuff like, well, if you publish a book with us, then you can't have another book come out with someone else for, say, 6 months either side of the release of this novel. So you're tied into that publisher, but that publisher maybe, I mean, someone like me, I can write, for Games Workshop at least, I can write a novel in 3 months. Other stuff takes me a little bit longer, but I can write quicker. I can write quicker than publishers can edit and publish stuff. So, even if I could write novels quickly enough to theoretically earn money from advances and so on, I can't. Publishers won't publish them quickly enough, even if they wanted to buy them in the first place. Whereas writing to contract for a market like Games Workshop, they're putting out books all the time, and they will very happily keep commissioning me and a whole bunch of other people to write books for them. So I am able to make a living from writing, but I'm only able to do that because I'm writing contract work to a multinational corporation, essentially. I think the number of people who can make a living off TradPub is vanishingly small.
Less than 1%, I would say.
Oh, God, easily.
So do you have time to write any other books? Anything else then, if you're just churning?
Oh, yeah, I was going to bristle for a moment. No, I do. Luckily enough, I'm able to. I know I will write a novel for Games Workshop, and maybe write another novel for Games Workshop. But then, as I said, because I'm a freelancer, if they say, "Oh, we would like you to write this," but I am able to go. Actually, no, I want to take 6 months because I want to write something of my own. And luckily, I have enough flexibility to be able to do that. But again, I'm married and my partner has a job, and I don't have any children. So I'm in a much better financial situation than many other people. Because if you're like a single parent, then you've probably not got, even if you were able to make enough money from publishing, you've not got you got more drains on your resources and fewer backstops than I do. So again, it's one of these other things of luck being a big part of it, and social privilege as well. If you've got more money, then you've got more free time because you're not having to work 2 jobs, for example. So you can start writing more, which means you're more likely to be able to put stuff out there. Whereas people who come from more economically disadvantaged backgrounds, if you're having to work 2-3 jobs, you've not got any time to write. So even if you're the best author in the world by any given metric, you simply haven't got enough time to put the words down on the paper and then have enough mental bandwidth to go through the often soul-destroying process of trying to query agents, and then if you get an agent, for the agent to then query publishers to see if they want to buy what you've got, which we've talked before about how the publishing industry is sort of, white, middle class, et cetera, and still male skewed as well. And that's a big thing. I'm very aware of the privileges that I have that have benefited me in that way. But yeah, even with all that, I wouldn't be able to make a living off TradPub.
I did for 10 years. But as I said, I was married at the time, and so it was kind of easier when you're living alone. The landlord says, right, I want my rent check at the beginning of each month. You can say, I might have a royalty check coming in June, but I'm not sure how much it's going to be yet. They get a bit itchy, so I've taken a part-time job to so I have a demonstrable income, and just to keep the wolf from the door in the lean times between advances.
HMRC. How much are you going to earn this year? It depends if anybody wants to buy a book. It's like, I've got no idea.
I work 4 days a week, and then I'm also a freelance editor and mentor for the Right Advice, and then I'm also a writer. So I get up at 5:30 in the morning and write for 2 hours, and then take the dog for a walk and do my day job, and then on Fridays I edit, and then 2 Sundays a month is when I do all of my mentoring. So yeah, that's how I make ends meet. But again, I don't have children, so the dog is the only drain on my time and attention, and my husband, not a drain, darling. But I don't have the demands of childcare. I just have poodle care instead. So.
Just a quick question: when you publish your books, do you guys say, "Oh, I want this cover put on a book," or
No.
you have no idea? You ever see your own book and you think, "I hate that cover." Well, you put that cover. You must have some kind of input. I'm a big Michael Moorcock fan. In his 70s books had brilliant sci-fi covers on them. And I think today's genre, they're not like that no more. They're more just mainstream, and you see a lot of old books get produced now. The covers aren't as good as the old ones. I just thought you have an input what goes on the cover of your books, because they do say don't judge a book by a cover. But you must have some kind of impact.
Marketing. It's like any other product. It's designed by a marketing team, and
you got no say whatsoever.
They will occasionally say, for instance, my forthcoming novel, Jitterbug, they showed me the cover and it had a rocket going up the middle. It's like a swoop like that. And I took one look at it and said, that looks like a butt. And so they changed it to kind of have straight edges, and it doesn't look like, so I won't have giant space butt.
That sounds like a selling point to me.
It sounds like a title to me, giant
space butt.
Yeah, and there was an astronaut hanging out the back of it.
Oh no! Oh dear.
Yeah, you might get asked your opinion every now and again, but it's not really going to. There are some authors, I'm sure, who can say, this is what I want on my cover, and they'll probably get it. But again, that's probably the less than 1% that are making a living from Trap Up. Yeah, I was asked once about, which of these pieces of art would you like on the cover? And it was like, oh, well, I mean, that one would probably work well. But then by the time they came to do it, the artist had already sold that piece of art to someone else, so we couldn't have it. So we had to make do with something else. You might get asked your opinion every now and again, but whether or not that will have any impact on the final outcome is marginal.
You ever think, oh, that's awful?
I have done that on occasion. You see a piece of cover art and go, well, it wouldn't have been my choice.
Yeah.
But
there were a few that came out a couple of years ago that were clearly AI made.
Oh yeah,
and the backlash for the publishers was pretty extreme in the sort of reader and writer community. And I think they've learnt their lesson. I haven't seen any that have been obviously AI recently.
It's been a big Game of Thrones thing recently.
Oh yeah, the illustrated edition.
Yeah, everybody was saying that the illustrations were all clearly done by AI. I can't believe the idea of George Martin has denied it, because you wouldn't say, yeah, you're right. But yeah, there's a lot of analysis of fingers and
teeth,
disappearing legs and teeth.
Yeah.
But I would say when you do see authors who design their own covers, as opposed to like professional book cover designers, Sturgeon's law very much applies. His law is 90% of everything is shit. Because I would rather have a team of experienced cover designers, marketers, and everything, even if I don't particularly like the cover, that I know it's going to, it's been designed so people who like that sort of fiction will look at that cover and go, that's the sort of fiction I like. I'll have some of that. Rather than if I said, let's have this like giant space bat with these, and it would, I know nothing about cover design, apart from what I picked up along the way. So yeah, I tend to trust them, but they have veto anyway. So.
Yeah, and I can't visualize stuff in like great detail. And, like, I can have an idea of like, oh, maybe vaguely this, but I really struggle to visualize things in detail unless I'm looking at it, which is why I struggle to describe the interiors of places and generally just try and avoid doing so. So I might look at a cover and go, I don't really like that very much, but I wouldn't be able to go, this is what I think would make a good cover, because I just don't have the visual imagination to say, oh yes, this and this sort of delicate filigree stuff here. And also, I can't describe colour, so that doesn't help. So yeah, I'm generally just content to let them do that, because that's what they're there for. People literally get paid to do this thing, and I get paid to put words down.
What would be your desert island fantasy book? And it can't be Pratchett or Tolkien.
I'm not answering them. Oh, can it be a trilogy, or does it have to be a standalone?
Standalone.
Shouldn't have answered. This is making it.
God, Anna.
I don't really read fantasy.
Also, always.
I mean, trying to pick one of anything is basically my nemesis. It's
Yeah.
like,
You have to run and grab one copy of something.
I'd probably grab Scarlet Morning by Andy Stevenson, which came out about a month or so ago. Andy Stevenson is the person who's the showrunner of She-Ra, it's a shirt that I'm wearing at the moment on Netflix, and recently released their first prose novel, which is supposedly middle grade, but I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of it. And there's a section in the middle that I think would give quite a few kids nightmares if they read it. So, but yeah, I loved it, and I've only read it once. So at the moment, that would probably be the thing that I'd grab.
What was the title of it?
Scarlet Morning. It's like a pirate mystery adventure horror.
Just keep adding adjectives.
Yeah, no, it's like all of these things apply. Trust me.
I think my problem is my memory is so good I can almost recite books I read like 30 years ago. So I would get very bored very quickly. So I'd have to choose something with lots of interesting stuff in it. So it would. The books that spring to mind are Star Maker by Olaf Stapledon, because there are so many sci-fi concepts per page in that book that you could write hundreds of books from each page of the book. And the other one is, which I would say was science fiction, was The Histories by Herodotus. Because it's supposed to be a factual, but he just makes stuff up. There's a lot of weird stuff. There are people with faces where their stomach should be, and it's a lot of it is just completely made up. And it's another great big thick fascinating book.
I'm gonna go with, because my something that I've never read, and when my friends found this out, they were absolutely scandalized, and so I would probably pick Redwall, just because I've never read it, and feel like I wouldn't have a lot of stuff to do apart from die slowly on a desert island. So.
It's like you want the biggest book possible for kindling.
Well, yeah. So I would probably take Redwall just to see what all the fuss was about.
And the softest pages possible.
Are there any universes you'd like to write novels in you haven't had the chance to yet?
If you'd asked me last year, I would have said Doctor Who, but I wrote Doctor Who book this year. I talked about how long it takes to write a book. I wrote that one in 4 weeks.
4 weeks?
Yeah. But that was easy because they gave me the script.
Yeah.
So I just had to go through and write he said, she said. After the slide it up. So, I wouldn't mind having a bash at Star Trek.
Star Trek.
Yeah. I'd say Star Wars, but that's a whole can of worms.
Which era of Star Trek?
I'm not fussy. I'm not fussy. Probably the original series or the Next Generation.
I mean, I would never be A, they don't do it, and B, I wouldn't be good enough to do it, but I would love to write in the Discworld. If that was ever became an open, we're gonna someone to carry on the legacy, we're gonna have the next generation of writers, just to see what happens next, kind of thing.
So many authors love it that they could honestly, if they opened that up, they could get 100 books out.
But it wouldn't be Terry.
No.
So I would feel like a fraud while I was doing it.
Right.
So I think it would be both a dream and also a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have loved to do some writing for She-Ra, because I discovered that in the pandemic and quickly made that my personality. It's like, look, I'm autistic and sometimes I just get fixated on stuff. Okay. But I think that's done. That's all fine. I think for stuff that actually does tie in fiction, I don't have a huge attachment to any sort of fictional universes. I enjoy a lot of them, but I think I probably would go for Star Wars because I've already had Death Threats. So, what's some more? That might be quite fun. But yeah, there's certainly there's sort of there's stuff that I might be interested to write for, but there's not a kind of burning desire for anything in particular. I think because I've been interested in Games Workshop for over 30 years. That was a long-running sort of gaming and fandom thing, and I'd read the novels that other people have been writing about it. That was a big thing that I would have loved to get into, and I was incredibly lucky that I have done it. There was nothing else that's been an ongoing, albeit intermittent, part of my life for that long that I would really love to jump into in the same way. So I think I kind of like goal achieved, really.
Yeah. With the Death Threats from 40k?
We don't talk about some people get very, very invested in their fandom, and if you do things that they don't like, such as acknowledging that queer people exist, they send you very nasty messages on the internet. Yes, but luckily, as I said, I worked for a homelessness charity for 15 years, so I've had very nasty things shouted in my face by people with the ability to follow through on that threat there and then. So people shouting at me on the internet, I just laugh at them.
It sucks that that's part of the.
The problem with any fandom of that nature is people get really invested in it, and that's great because it means that they love it and they're having a lot of fun. But some people get so fixated on their idea of it that they really struggle with anything that challenges that. Yeah. And that, as I think we can all acknowledge, is probably not good, because sometimes the people who actually hold the copyright will decide that they're going to do a certain thing in a certain way, and then everybody's outraged and it's the worst thing that's ever happened. And sometimes particular individuals can be singled out, and it's not just, well, I mean, Gareth alluded to the Star Wars thing. I think it was Chuck Wendig had a big backlash, and it's happened in other stuff as well. It's like, oh, this person, whether that's a showrunner, I mean, God, the abuse I've seen towards the people who made the Wheel of Time TV series, which, I mean, I watched the first season and some of the second, and it was different to the story that I remembered, but I still enjoyed it. But the crap I've seen them get, and the people who've made Rings of Power and everything, is like, you have your own opinions of the stories, yes, fine, and you can say, I don't like this retelling of it, or I don't like this interpretation of it, it's not for me. But then it's when people just turn that into a hate campaign. Yeah. I mean, you've got people who are absolutely outraged that the head of the Star Wars creative at the moment is a woman, I think, and the decision that she's made about some stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some Star Wars stuff that's come out that I've gone, I don't really like that very much, but I'm not going to hunt someone down and start yelling at them for it. It's people get invested in stuff, that's great, because amongst other things, that makes people like me money when I write for them. But when people get too invested and they feel that they have ownership of it rather than it is something that they are enjoying, that can lead to some unsavory interactions.
Yeah, fair enough. Very much like the country and the flags and everything. And this is my version of the country.
Yeah. Be arseholes. If there's one takeaway from today, people can be arseholes. No.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I stand up because I can't speak to a room of people sat down? It's too weird. It was more really because you're a lady. So it's more directed to you, but feel free to chime in. You touched on it with sort of like the Star Wars thing, and I was wondering if you felt that being a woman, did you ever feel that you had maybe opportunities not given to you because you're a woman in a more male-dominated industry, or maybe vice versa, like you said about your friend who looked at the list and thought, shit, we better have a woman. Have you ever maybe had an opportunity purely because they needed a woman to sort of even up the numbers, or do you find it different?
I think so. I've got a book that I'm currently rewriting due to some editorial feedback. And what I had written was a very sort of standard adventurous epic fantasy novel. And we sort of sent it out on submission, and nobody wanted it. And then I got some feedback from one editor who said, if you rewrote this as a romantasy, I would probably take it. And that was a bit of a punch to the gut, to be honest with you, because, you know, have you ever been asked to write a romantasy? Like, none of my male writer friends have ever been asked to, well, can you rewrite this as a romantasy, and then we might take it. So that felt very pointed, and I was big mad about it for quite a while. And then, you know, I had a chat with my agent, and he said, 100% up to you. If you don't want to do it, we're not going to do it. If you want to give it a go, give it a go. And I thought, I can treat it like a craft exercise. I can treat it as do I have the chops to do this? Can I research what a romance book, the beats, and you know, at 30% they have their first kiss, at 50% they declare their love for each other, at 70% they split up. You know, can I do that? Do I want to do that? And, you know, I sulked about it for a while, and I had a lot of conversations, and then I thought, let's give it a go. See if I hate doing it, I'll just stop. So that is the book that I am just about to finish rewriting. So I've gone for it. I wouldn't say I have loved the process all the way through, but it has been interesting. It has been interesting to, for me, who usually writes epic fantasy with a lot of military elements, a lot of action scenes, it has been very interesting to strip all of that out and just focus on characters and emotions and a developing relationship and stuff like that. So it's not where my future publishing lies. I will definitely submit it and see if the publisher wants to take it, and they are probably going to want a duology, so there's probably going to be a follow-up. But I don't think I will then continue in the romantasy genre. But, you know, I mean, I wrote for Black Library for you know, a couple of years. That wasn't something that was in my wheelhouse. I've written 2 Marvel novels, superhero fantasy, definitely not, you know, people being able to pick up cars and chuck them at each other. That's not what I write. So I've just taken it as in the same vein as that, as it's an opportunity. It's not something that I would have done on my own. But if I can learn a few lessons from it and maybe apply those to future fiction, that, you know, maybe I'll just be a little bit better at writing relationships from now on. But yeah, that did feel very pointed, and it felt like at the time publishing had kind of gone back to the 1950s, and it was, oh well, you know, you're a female presenting person, therefore the only you can write kissing books. We'll leave the action to these guys. I'm like, is that really how you want to present yourself? Okay.
Money. Well,
Well,
you might as well take the opportunity.
That's the thing, isn't it? You know, is the longer you go without having a book out, the more your career, you know, begins to stagnate and people forget about you, and then you're kind of starting from scratch again in 5 years when the romantic bubble finally bursts. Or I can get a couple of books out that I'm proud of to a certain extent, but I wouldn't have chosen to write.
Thank you.
I got approached to be in a queer anthology. I think the problem was that maybe I got approached because, I mean, it's not like I'm famous, but some people have heard of me.
Tokenism.
Sorry?
Like a bit of tokenism, like you were approached because you're famous and you're queer, not.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not famous, but I think that the problem was is that the people who did the anthology possibly hadn't worked out that A, I suck at short stories, and B, I'm an author who is queer rather than a queer author, I guess. I write queer normative worlds. Often I have queer characters, but my stories are not about the experience of being queer. My stories are about generally socio-political stuff that happens to have a bunch of queer characters involved in it somewhere. And so I wrote a story for them, but it wasn't queer enough. Basically, it had a queer character, but it was not about the direct experience of being queer. Which they're a queer publishing company that writing a queer anthology, so I get where they were coming from. But it did leave you with the sort of feeling, oh, hang on a second, guys, have you read any of my fiction? Do you know what I actually write?
Yeah.
And have you worked out the fact that I've not had aside from Games Workshop contracted stuff, I've not had a short story published in years. Did you actually try to get me in this anthology because you thought I could write a queer focused short story, or did you get me into the anthology, ask me to be in the anthology because you know I'm a queer author who has had via Games Workshop an Audible best-selling novel, or whose fantasy novel which has queer characters and queer normative world building but is about socio-political stuff that got nominated for a British Fantasy Award? It's like, is that what you're after from me? Because I have that. I don't necessarily have the ability to write you a short story that is about the lived experience of being queer and the problems that presents, because that's not what I do.
Nick Mohammed did a podcast recently, you know, who was in Try as the comedian. He did a podcast recently saying exactly what you just said about, because he's Asian, and he was saying how he doesn't want to just write about stereotypical brown families. He just wants to write about his family doing normal things, like you're saying. You have queer characters because that's how you that they're just there because they're there. They're not. It's not their journey. It's just they're part of the natural story because that's the natural world that you've created, rather than we need to go into everyone's backstory about this, and this. Saying similar to like you said, if you do it at the top in publishing houses where you have more diverse people in the background, not just as the authors, then you get more normal stories rather than the tokenism of let's put a black person here and a queer person here and a lesbian and a lady, just to try and put those boxes.
Yeah.
I saw a thing from an interview with Rahul Kohli recently where he said, I don't want to be competing for roles against Riz Ahmed. I want to be competing for roles against Chris Pratt.
Yeah.
It's like, don't have, this is the Asian character, and therefore there are like 3 Asian actors who might play it. Like, have characters, and these actors might be able to play those characters depending on whether they're the right fit for the role for these reasons, not because it's an Asian character. Although we're now diverging.
Yeah, of course.
Very much along the same sort of lines regarding representation. I mean, I'm thinking specifically of queer representation. I am, but do you think it's more important to have subtle representation that's very much sort of queer normative as opposed to overtly about the experience of being queer, or do you think it's important to have very overt queerness as well in order to make sure people can't ignore it? Because I think there's a balance to strike, but
I think publishing is big enough to have all of those things. And I think it should. You know, I mean, if we go back to She-Ra, for example, you know, a fair amount of that was pretty subtle. And then Double Trouble came along and was like, hello! and I think there is definitely room for the quiet, you know, the quiet stuff and the loud stuff, and, you know, all of the pomp and ceremony. And I think it should all be in there.
Yeah, I think it's because you can have, so a couple of series that I've been reading recently were Tasha's series, Burning Empires, and Burning Kingdom, sorry, and C.L. Clarke's Magic of the Lost.
Yep.
both of which feature queer characters struggling against homophobias in society. And I think it's a very important thing to have because that still exists today. But at the same time, I don't think that a queer person or black person or a disabled person or any other marginalised group should only have to read about characters like themselves struggling against oppression. There should be the visualization of, what if this was just normal? What if no one had an issue with how I was? Can we just not create a society where that is a thing? I think, yeah, there is room for both, and I think there probably should be both. On the one hand, for recognised, like you were saying right at the start, of taking an issue and telling it through a sci-fi or a fantasy setting to make it a bit more palatable to people who don't like being directly preached to. There's certainly definitely a place for that, for like the struggle, and to highlight that these are problems in society, in many societies, that need to be addressed. But I think there's also a space for like blue sky thinking of, what if I can create a society when I'm writing, I can create a society where, aside from the inherent biases in my own writing that I have not acknowledged or have not discovered yet, there is no biases. And the struggle comes from something else. I would like to see both. I like the reading that I've done of these things, but I also like when I pick something up and it's just like, actually, no one's like slinging out homophobic abuse in this story. I can just read it and enjoy the story without that sort of constant downer going on.
I tell you what is an excellent book. The first two are out, Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. It has a character in it who is a trans man, and the novel is written by a trans man, and it has all sorts of, there's class prejudice and you know, all of this kind of, you know, xenophobia and stuff like that, but there is no transphobia, there is no misgendering, and there is no dead naming, and that appears, there was a list of content warnings at the start because it's a dark, gory, bloody book. And it says, you know, there is going to be this, there is going to be this, there is not going to be any of this. And the series so far is astonishing, and I'm losing my mind over the second book. But even when the trans character is arrested and put in prison, he is still allowed to have his hormones and his treatments and stuff like that. And that is not, it's just a right. It's just part of society that they're like, well, of course, yes, you're a convicted criminal, but we're not going to force you to detransition by withholding your hormones from you. And it's just so refreshing. And also it's so good. Please read it.
Very, very aware I'm speaking as a white, middle-aged, straight guy. But in my books, there are queer characters, there are multiracial characters, but they're not in there because of that. Their sexuality is not important to the plot. They are just there. They're just humans, like we are in you know, in the real world. We're not there because we have to fulfill a certain plot function. They're just there, and they're capable. They can, you know, they come and go. They're good. They're bad. You know, I got a lot of abuse for putting a trans character in the last book of the Embers of War trilogy, and they're not there because they're a trans character. They just happen to be. But I got all sorts of reviews that had to be taken down off Amazon just for including it.
Did you go woke, Gareth?
The review I mentioned just said woke homo nonsense, 1 star. So,
I will print out,
Sign me up.
frame it, stick it on the wall.
yeah. So yeah, I just try and reflect the world, not because those aren't my stories to tell, but
acknowledging that those stories exist.
Yeah.
acknowledging that they exist and acknowledging that people exist. Yeah.
How do you navigate the line between diversity of representation and appropriation?
Sensitivity readers. Reading very widely and doing tons of research. That was for me, Songs of the Drowned trilogy is set in a secondary world, Mesoamerica. So it is set in a world where everybody has brown skin. And I wrestled with that for months. I had a lot of long conversations with peers that I respect, some who are white, some who are people of color. I spoke to my agent, my editors, and I was like, look, I've got two choices. I can set it in a tropical rainforest and have everybody be white, which feels like whitewashing. Or I can have everybody have the same skin tone. It's just not my skin tone. And for good or bad, the latter was the choice that I made. As far as I'm aware, it has been received well. I hired a sensitivity reader. I had a bunch of friends who are people of color who have read it, and any notes that they had at draft stage, like every single comment, I was like, right, that's coming out. I was not precious about it at all because I was trying to be as respectful as possible. I think it's been fairly well received by the general public. I don't know because I don't read my reviews, because that way madness lies. But I haven't had any sort of direct contact from people saying you shouldn't have done this. But I think at the end of the day, it's a choice that everybody needs to sit with. And the way I see it, the fact that I'm white is I'm already in a position of privilege within the publishing world. If I can diversify my writing and that finds readers, and then readers think, well, I want more like that, I'm going to go to an actual person of color who has written it. So for me, I see it as this is an entry point for you to then go and read N.K. Jemisin or Octavia Butler or Stuart Hoxton or all of the millions of incredibly talented authors of color. But yeah, I mean, only time will tell. I'm sure there's someone on the internet who's mad at me, and that's their right, because at the end of the day, once a book is out in the world, it becomes the reader's thing. It's not mine, it's theirs now, and people are within their rights to take offense at the choice I made. And all I can say is that I didn't want to write another medieval European setting. I wanted to write something different, but you have to take into consideration that if you move environments and you move climates and you move locations, then that does come with consequences. And I'm really sorry, but I've got a train.
I just realised what time it is. I'm so sorry. We'll wrap up. I'm sorry, I didn't realise it was that long.
I'm going to navigate my way back through the Kingfisher Centre.
Fair enough. But thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. And I really appreciate you all coming so far to chat to us today. And we have books for sale at the back if any of you would like to buy. But thank you very much. That was awesome.
Thank you.